We're waiting.
Ready.
Okay, here we are, everybody. Bonnie Erbay, host of PBS's weekly women's news analysis and documentary show, To the Contrary. Joining me are Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton of the District of Columbia and a major figure in the Democratic Party, and Patrice Onwuka with the Independent Women's Forum, who has been organizing marches of conservative women who support the Kavanaugh nomination on Capitol Hill. Patrice, let's start with you. Now that it looks about a sure thing that he will be confirmed, how are you feeling?
You know, I think this is a very good day for people who believe in justice and fairness, and for people who believe that the next Supreme Court justice should uphold the Constitution. I was literally spending the morning on the Hill visiting Senator Collins's office, Senator Murkowski's office, and with a bunch of other women who support Judge Kavanaugh, and making the point that, this is really important. And there are women across the country who support Judge Kavanaugh. So it's great to hear, particularly to listen to Susan Collins, speech just now and why she supports him and how she just laid out, debunking a lot of the myths, a lot of the partisanship that we've seen in this process. And hopefully we will have no surprises tomorrow during his final confirmation vote.
All right, Congresswoman Norton, you could say that she was trying to be fair and kind, and as she said, innocent until proven guilty. On the other hand, you could say that Senator Collins just bought all the, what progressives are seeing as lies, and progressives did not want him to succeed to the court. And what are your thoughts?
Susan Collins gave a full-throated apologia. She spent almost an hour, 50 minutes on the floor, and she did that for a reason. She did it because she was in effect standing against justice for women, and she has been feeling it from women, and she's going to feel it more from women. This was a real test for senators about where they're going to stand when it's women against a powerful man. And
well, we should say women and progressive.
I think they lose.
And progressive men, right?
And progressive, to be sure. But they lose. For example, most of the senators, including Senator Collins, are hanging their vote on corroboration. Bonnie, hear me. There will never be a woman with a greater case for corroboration. She took a lie detector test before a polygraph, before coming to give her testimony. She went into therapy as a result of the attack by Judge Kavanaugh. She had an eyewitness to the assault. Now, the message for women is, if this woman could not show she was assaulted, most sexual assaults are dead in the water because they take place in private, and it's one person's word against another. She had much more than that. She had such extraordinary credibility that even the president had to admit she was credible and compare her to Judge Kavanaugh's credibility. When asked, do you think that there should be an FBI investigation, he refused to answer. So when it comes to credibility, I think she wins hands down.
All right, and what's they said, I heard on the radio this week, somebody saying that the side who loses on the Kavanaugh battle will be the winner in terms of turnout at the polls in November. Congresswoman Norton, do you believe, having watched all the elections you have, that that Democrats will take back the House? Do they have any chance at winning the Senate because of today?
Chance now, or tomorrow, or the day when this vote occurs. And let me give some evidence, Bonnie. The vote in 1991, the year of the woman, the House and the Senate voted full year afterwards. What happened after Clarence Thomas stayed ripe for that full year? And women went to the polls and they said, look, you may win your Supreme Court nominee, but you will get your comeuppance at the next election. I am going to predict that that's what's going to happen here, particularly since the election is so close and not a full year as in the Clarence Thomas case.
Patrice, your thoughts on that issue, that the Republicans may have won the battle, but when it comes to November, they've now energized Democrats beyond, and a new poll just came out yesterday or today showing Republicans finally equally energized with Democrats. But studies have shown, as the Congresswoman said, when you win the battle, everybody goes home and says, why should I bother to vote?
So what's interesting is when you compare this enthusiasm gap from the start of this year until now, we have seen the double-digit margin that Democrats had shrink to a single-digit margin, and as you just alluded to, closing in even within that margin of error. So conservatives are absolutely more energized right now. I think GOP pollsters as well as fundraisers will say that there is definitely support. I don't think
I'm talking about a month from now. Will that still be the case? When an appeal saying we lost, if you want us to win, you better send money, you better get to the polls, versus, oh, we won. Well, do you want to send us more money? Are you still going to the polls? Does it work like that?
Well, that's a fair point, but this is not just about Kavanaugh. I think as we know in midterms, conservatives definitely tend to have the advantage in terms of turnout, number one. Number two, voters who tend to turn out in midterms tend to be older and more Republican. But in this case, number three, there are also a lot of things going for a conservative movement right now. I mean, we've seen a blockbuster jobs report coming out today. We have now hit the lowest unemployment rate in 49 years. So not only do conservatives have a lot to run on in terms of positive and a message that says, if we want to continue this success in our economy, if we want to ensure that the next vacancy on the Supreme Court is filled with a conservative justice, then this is the kind of Congress that we need to make that happen. And I think while it may feel like, well, that enthusiasm may dissipate over in 1 year, in 1 month, the gains that have been made so far, I think it's going to be a hard case to suggest that conservatives are going to say, you know what, forget it, the fight is over. I think they're still going to turn out, and I think it will come down to whether or not there'll be enough of that enthusiasm. But it's pretty fair to say that it's going to be there.
I'm sitting in Washington D.C. in the Congress of the United States. We have just had the biggest demonstrations in the halls of the Senate and in the streets of the nation's capital that I have ever seen. We've had marches, but not the kind of huge crowds, women and men, by the way, coming here. And that's why I'm saying this thing's got staying power.
Well,
what about hold on, Patrice. What about impeaching Judge Kavanaugh? Most of the polls have been saying for months now that the Democrats will recapture the House. It remains to be seen on Election Day, but assuming you do, wouldn't the first thing to do be to impeach him, even if you don't, Delegate Norton, even if you don't have the votes in the Senate to finalize the process?
It's true that out in the base, there are many people who want to see him impeached, gone for 2020 when we're really going to get him. But you talk to anybody in the House of Representatives, beginning with our leader, and they will tell you that's not our first order of business. In fact, that's not even on our business. That's not even our business at all. Our business is stopping Trump, yes, having oversight, but a very big reason why we're not going to go for impeachment is that you need 2/3 of the Senate. And even if we control the Senate, we certainly won't have 2/3 of the Senate.
Right, but the Republicans, when they controlled the House, impeached President Clinton, and he wasn't. They did the trial in the House, which was a huge public spectacle,
and they got their comeuppance. And in other words, that's a test case. That's because they were not able to impeach him. They were not able to impeach him. Look,
they still trashed his reputation.
Oh, it didn't do him any good. He had two terms, and he was one of the most popular presidents we've had.
Well, Bonnie, let me just jump in and say there's a reason why Democrats would not want to impeach Judge, or hopefully soon to be Justice Kavanaugh, and it's because they recognize that his credentials make him more than qualified to sit on the bench. My good colleague here, Delegate Norton, certainly laid out. She talked about this being about a vote against women. That is absolutely untrue. To make this false dichotomy that if you support victims of sexual assault, particularly women, then you must absolutely believe Dr. Ford's allegations, and you must believe that Judge Kavanaugh is lying. That is a false dichotomy. And there are many women across this country who believe that. By the way, Harvard and Harris polling last weekend, right after the testimonies of both people, they dug into the question of whether an FBI investigation would be enough to change your mind about the confirmation of Judge Kavanaugh. 60% of Americans said yes, he should be confirmed.
There was also polling this week that supported the Democrats' claim that this was a sham investigation. I want to ask you a personal question.
Sure.
You were up on the Hill, and you were there with conservative women, but you were way outnumbered by progressive women who were lobbying against Kavanaugh. Did any of them come up to you and say, "Do you hate us? Are you a woman hater?" Because that's how it comes off, I know, to a lot of women who just feel like a sexual abuser and a would-be rapist is now going to be on the Supreme Court.
I certainly had people look at me while the group of women, busloads of women, by the way, who support Kavanaugh, we were praying before going into those offices. We had people who were heckling us, and that is sad. I had people give me a double look. Thankfully, I didn't have anybody come up to me and physically assault me or anything like that, but I think there were people who questioned why I believe what I believe. And again, Bonnie, I think it's fair to say that as a woman, I can support victims of sexual assault being able to tell their story. I do. But I can also at the same time believe that it is fair to look at every specific case, look at the corroboration of the allegations, look at the evidence in the case, and make a decision and say, you know what, in this case, I think Judge Kavanaugh should be confirmed. I think there's not enough evidence to support that. And there are women, I would love for you to Delegate Norton, take a look at my Twitter page at the women who say, yes, I stand with Judge Kavanaugh for exactly the reasons that you say. And this is not the end all be all for women. I think it's important that we recognize that, fairness and presumption of innocence are bedrock principles in our criminal justice system. And when we turn that upside down and spend that for political motivations or whatever reason, in one case, that is going to hurt other people.
But you don't mind that millions of women out there see conservative women such as yourself as women haters.
Well, that's why I talk about why this is not a matter of hating women. This is a matter of looking at the case in front of you and recognizing that number one, women are not monolithic. We will not always agree. It doesn't mean that you don't necessarily support victims of assault. It's a false dichotomy to believe that, yes, because she's a woman and she makes this allegation, I have to absolutely believe that. I think
I just had to ask the question. Congresswoman, go ahead and say what you were about to start saying.
Yeah, I certainly don't think that my good friend hates women, but I think she is in an impossible place. Who do you believe? Somebody is lying. It is either Christine Blasey Ford or Judge Kavanaugh. And that is where I think we have the Republicans over a barrel. This wasn't a nuanced case. Her memory was remarkable. She remembered more than I dare anyone looking at us to say they remembered. And why? You can forget a lot of things in your life. You may forget where you put your keys, even an hour ago, but you will never forget when you were sexually assaulted. You will never forget that somebody put their hands over your mouth to keep you from screaming. You will never forget that the witness in the room, Mark Judge, jumped on both of you, and that's the only way you got loose. Those of the women, like my good friend, who are trying to say there's the burden of proof has not been met here, are really saying to women who are looking at us, you know good and well you will never meet that burden of proof. So do not come forward. And
Okay.
that is the tragedy that we are seeing before our eyes.
But when cases, as they are poised to do, on abortion rights, on sexual assault, etc., come before the Supreme Court, and Judge Kavanaugh, then soon to be Justice Kavanaugh, rules as we know he will rule. I mean, Susan Collins talked about that on the floor today, saying, oh, he told me it's settled law. Well, there are plenty of cases that's what justices are there to do, change settled law. I covered the Supreme Court for 9 years, if that's their political bent. You say that the House will not move to impeach him. What about when the Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade?
Right.
We still will not have 2/3 of the Senate, Bonnie.
It doesn't matter. Just to put him through the phases of impeachment hearings would your supporters would, I gotta believe, by and large, appreciate that.
My supporters right now want me to be for impeachment. I don't think there's a member of the Democratic House who doesn't have that. But unlike Republicans who have not learned from the Anita Hill confirmation, we certainly have learned that you do not go for impeachment if you don't have the votes. Moreover, we really think we could get something done even with a Republican Senate. And by the way, I think we have decent chance of a Democratic Senate, but we certainly don't have any chance of getting the 2/3. So I think Democrats will have to show that they want to get something done. And the worst way to show that is to go for impeachment, whatever your constituents want as on a short-term basis.
Okay, but let me ask you this. When Democrats, is it in the Constitution that there must be a 2/3 majority in the Senate for impeachment? Or is it rules that senators can change, as McConnell changed when he abolished the nuclear option?
For impeachment, it's 2/3 as a constitutional matter. In other words, the framers really did not mean that did not make it easy to take someone who had been elected to office and throw him out of office. And rightly so. We also have a lot of people who were president and who aren't president or ceased being president very quickly.
All right, Patrice.
This is not like the filibuster vote, where they did, in fact, change the filibuster vote.
Which is what I was referring to when I said the nuclear option. Patrice, what's up next for conservative women?
Well, certainly looking at what happens after tomorrow's vote. I think coming together and recognizing, okay, God willing, we will have a Justice Kavanaugh on the bench. What is next? And I think it's ensuring that, number one, we still have a strong economy where you can get a good job, where you can see your wages rise, where your family's being able to take care of those, your family budget. I think. And that we're looking at, of course, the midterm elections. And so, making sure that women understand how important it is that when they go to the poll, they're thinking about, is their financial position better? Is their family safer than before? And then what leadership in Washington is going to be able to do that? On a bigger note, though, I think it's important.
Let me just, because we're trying to wrap it up.
Okay.
Congresswoman Norton, your final words. What do you think that senators such as Heidi Heitkamp, red state senators, Democrats, Donnelly in Indiana, and will still be able to win? Is it possible they're racist, even though they, and Claire McCaskill is another one, because they voted against Judge Kavanaugh? Or will people such as Joe Manchin from red states, Democrats who voted yes on his nomination, will he lose because of what he did?
In fact, Bonnie, you ought to ask yourself, how come he was the only red state Democrat that voted for Judge Kavanaugh? And I think there's a reason. He was perhaps in more trouble because Trump won his state by perhaps the largest margin of any state. But then you have to look at, why did all these other red state Democrats vote with other Democrats? Even Heidi Heitkamp, who's been written off. I think she knows that her enthusiasm rate is going to go through the ceiling. And I think Senator Donnelly of Indiana, and the other red state Democrats know as well. So I believe they would have been punished, not because the majority of Republicans aren't with them, but because they are dependent upon a huge Democratic turnout and some loyalty from Republicans, which they have always had.
All right. Thank you both very much for joining us on this To the Contrary Google Hangout. Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton, Patrice Onwuka of the Independent Women's Forum. Thank you both, and have a great weekend.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Thanks, Bonnie.